Maybe it starts with a headache, but not the kind you get from skipping lunch or staring at a screen for too long. The kind that feels like something is trying to push its way out from behind your eyes. But maybe it's nothing. You drink water, you take some aspirin, and you get some sleep. But the headache doesn't go away. Your skin turns red in patches like you've been sunburned, but you haven't been outside. Your hair starts falling out in clumps when you brush it. You smell something metallic in the air, like pennies or old batteries, and then realize it's coming from you.
Welcome to Down the Crooked Path. I'm your host, Amanda Joy. Join me as we dive into eerie and spine-chilling stories that blur the lines between reality and the unknown. From cryptids and mysterious disappearances to true crime, UFO sightings, and paranormal activity. Venture into the unknown and uncover the secrets that lie down the crooked path.
Sometimes symptoms don't follow any known patterns. Blood work can show white blood cells multiplying like they're bracing for something. Lymph nodes start swelling and blistering skin. But the patient hasn't touched chemicals or wandered near reactors. Maybe something did something to them, something strange and unexplainable, something that defies all logic and reason. And maybe that event has left behind evidence, like mold behind wallpaper. In 1896, Nikola Tesla burned the skin off his fingers while experimenting with X-rays. He hadn't known what they were yet, no one did, and William Routon had only discovered them a few months earlier, and the world was still catching up. Tesla noticed the damage days later, after the pain had settled in and the skin had already begun to peel. He called it a minor inconvenience at the time. The world was hailing X-rays as miracles. They could see through flesh, reveal bones and bullets and tumors. They were invisible, untouchable, and suddenly they were indispensable. Hospitals rushed to install machines. Doctors rushed to pose patients like statues and fire beams through bodies with no shielding and no warning. Being deemed miracles, the burns and the fatigue by the X-rays were all ignored. Next came radium. Marie and Pierre Curie isolated it in 1898, and by the early 1900s, it was packed into tonics, face creams, toothpaste, and more. It lit up watch dials. It made glass shimmer. Sold as a cure for everything from arthritis to depression, the radium glow was seductive. But then came the sickness, with crumbling jawbones and teeth that fell out. That same miracle that promised healing had begun to rot people from the inside. The problem was that the damage wasn't immediate. It was slow and cumulative, making it hard to trace. The connection between radium poisoning and illness was easy to dismiss at first. Marie Curie had spent years working with radium by hand, boiling it down in open vats. She kept samples in her pocket, handled it barehanded, and by night, she wrote by its light. By the time anyone realized how deadly radium was, the damage was already irreversible. Marie's bone marrow was failing. She had developed aplastic anemia, a condition where the body forgets how to make blood. She died in 1934 from a slow accumulation of exposure. The same element that had won her 2 Nobel Prizes had hollowed her out from the inside. In 1845, Hiroshima and Nagasaki weren't just bombed, they were transformed. The heat incinerated buildings, vaporized bodies, and turned shadows into permanent stains on concrete. But the blast wasn't the end of it. Survivors walked through the wreckage, burned but breathing, unaware that the worst of the damage had already been done. Skin blistered within days, followed by hair that fell out and fevers that climbed high and steady. People started to bleed from the inside without injury, Doctors called it atomic disease, and for years, the radiation gripped to the earth, leached in the water, invisible and lethal. Radiation had turned light into a weapon that didn't stop killing after the explosion. It became a curse. Physicist Harry Dunglian had dropped a tungsten carbide brick into a plutonium core during an experiment, and it triggered a burst of nutrient radiation. He died weeks later from acute radiation poisoning. The following year, 1946, Louis Sulfton performed a similar test with the same core, nicknamed the Demon Core, and slipped, letting 2 beryllium hemispheres touch. The reaction was instant, and he died 9 days later. These weren't explosions. They were just flashes of blue and a wave of sickness that unraveled the body from the inside. Then, in 1986, Chernobyl made that danger public. A reactor exploded during a late-night safety test, releasing radioactive material across Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia. First responders arrived without protective gear, unaware that they were walking into a lethal field. Some collapsed within hours. Others developed acute radiation syndrome, which includes vomiting, blistering, and organ failure. Out of the 134 confirmed cases, 28 died within weeks. The rest carried the damages forward. Survivors faced cancer, infertility without cause, immune systems that stopped working. Children born in that region showed mutations. Forests turned red, animals vanished. The fallout didn't stay localized either. It drifted across Europe, settling into soil, seeped into water. The radiation had become a legacy, and no one could say how long said radiation would last. But not every exposure comes from a lab or a reactor. Sometimes it happens on a quiet road, under open skies without any warning. In December of 1980, 2 women and a young boy were driving through rural Texas when they saw something in the air, something that was bright and massive and pulsing with unbearable heat. Following this event was an illness that, to this day, no one could explain. Betty Cash and Vicki Lundrum were 2 women from Dayton, Texas. Their lives were routine of work and family. Betty Cash was a businesswoman who worked long hours. She ran a roadside restaurant and a used car lot, both of which demanded attention beyond bookkeeping and keys. Her marriage had ended years earlier, and this caused her to act tougher than she appeared. Friends would describe her as independent, sometimes stubborn, but not easily rattled. She was known as someone who was direct and wouldn't sugarcoat things. She had a steady routine, a tight social circle, and by all accounts was in good health. Vicki Lundrum lived nearby and was a few years older. She had in recent years found religion and was deeply rooted in the evangelical Christian community. She was known for her devotion to her family, especially her grandson Colby, who was 7 years old and she often looked after. She wasn't a wealthy woman, but she was resourceful. People knew her as kind but firm. She didn't drink, gamble, or stray far away from her moral compass. Now, these 2 ladies, they weren't best friends, but they knew each other well enough to share a meal and a ride. Betty had the car, Vicki had the time, and Colby was easy enough to bring along. December 29th, 1980. A Monday night, cold but not bitter. The kind of chill that settles into the bones, though. Betty Cash was driving her Oldsmobile Cutlass down the stretch of FM 1485 near Huffman, Texas. It's a 2-lane road hemmed in by dense pine trees. Vicki Lundrum sat beside her, Colby in the back seat, his small frame bundled against the cold. The group was returning home from dinner and had finished up around 9 p.m. At first, they thought maybe it might be a plane. Houston Intercontinental wasn't too far away, and the flight paths sometimes dipped low over the woods. But this object was just floating there, hovering and pulsing faintly. Then the light moved. Not away, not towards them, but up and down, descending through the trees like it was searching for something. Then came the heat, sudden and sharp, radiating through the windshield like they had driven into a furnace, and the smell followed, metallic, sour like pennies left too long in the sun. Both women exited the car to get a closer look, telling Colby to stay in the car, and of course, he was frightened, so he did. It's when they left the car that the two women could really see it. A diamond-shaped craft with flat ends and a surface that caught the light like polished metal. The body was silver, bright enough to sting the eyes, and was ringed with small blue lights that blinked in a rhythm. From its base, flames erupted and burst, short, violent jets that sent the craft lurching upward before it settled again, almost as if it were struggling to stay airborne. The heat became immediate and intense. The car's metal began to radiate it to the point where the door handles were too hot to touch barehanded. Vicky, who had wandered back to the car to comfort Colby, had to use her coat to protect her hands while opening the door handles. As she leaned into the car, she braced herself against the vinyl, and her palm sank into it. It had become soft and pliable from the heat, and when she pulled her hand back, it left an imprint. Colby was crying now, curled in the backseat, his voice high and panicked. Vicky reached for him, and being a born-again Christian, saw this as some sort of religious, significant event, and she tried to comfort him by saying, "That's Jesus. He will not hurt us." Betty, on the other hand, was still outside of the car and was now standing almost directly underneath this thing, close enough to make her eyes water and her breath catch from the heat. She stared up at it, her face glowing against the light, before she, too, eventually returned to the car. This is when helicopters appeared, not one or two, but a full formation of 23 in total, their rotors slicing through the air in a synchronized motion. Betty looked up and saw that they were coming in from the north, their silhouettes backlit by the glow of the craft. The helicopters surrounded the object in a wide arc, their formation tight, and their altitude low enough to rattle the branches of the pines that lined the road. Other witnesses would later come forward with reports of helicopter sightings as well. The witnesses would later identify them as CH-47 Chinooks, the kind used by the military for heavy transport, and recognized by their tandem rotors and bulky frames. To the women, it seemed as if the choppers were escorting or protecting the craft rather than attempting to attack it or chase it away. The trio returned home, and within hours, Betty Cash began to deteriorate. It started off with nausea, then vomiting, then diarrhea, which left her too weak to stand. Her skin blistered across her neck and face, red patches blooming like she'd spent the day under sun lamps turned on too high. Her eyes swelled, her scalp burned, and when she brushed her hair, it came away in clumps. She didn't go to the hospital right away. She waited, hoping that it would pass, believing that maybe it was a virus or something that she had eaten given the stomach issues. But by January 3rd, she couldn't walk. Her breathing was shallow, her speech slurred, and she was nearly unconscious when she was admitted to Parkway General Hospital in Houston. The nurses noted the burns first, the raw, peeling skin across her hands and face, and then the swelling, and then the hair loss. Her temperature fluctuated too, her blood pressure dropped, and she drifted in and out of lucidity. unable to explain what had happened except to say that she had been near something bright, near something hot, and something that didn't quite belong. Her physicians called the symptoms textbook radiation poisoning. This was not a mild exposure either, nor was it caused from a leak in a microwave or a broken smoke detector. This was the kind of damage seen in survivors near the blast zones of Hiroshima. The kind that doesn't come from sunlight or heat alone. Her body showed signs of cellular breakdown, white blood cells multiplying in panic, lymph nodes inflamed, skin tissue dying. And the burns weren't surface level, they were deep, layered, and resistant to standard treatments. She stayed in the hospital for weeks. Her condition didn't stabilize quickly. The blisters festered, her vision blurred, and her hair thinned until her scalp showed through. And no one could explain it. No one could trace it to a known source. There were no records of radiation in the area. There were no reports of chemical spills, no military exercise listed for that night or the days that followed. Her body told a totally different story, and her doctors documented every inch of it. Vicki Lundrum became sick too, but she didn't go to the hospital right away. She stayed home and kept Colby close and tried to manage the symptoms as they came. Her eyes burned, her skin reddened across her face and arms, and the headaches settled behind her temples like something pressing from the inside. She used cold compresses, over-the-counter cream, and prayer. Her burns weren't as severe as Betty's, but they were peeling in patches and leaving behind raw, tender skin that stung when touched. Her vision blurred immediately, her energy dropped, and she wasn't sleeping well. Colby had symptoms too, but they were harder to track. He was 7, a small boy for his age, and quiet even before the incident happened. Afterward, he cried more often, clinging to Vicki's side and refused to sleep alone. He too complained of burning eyes and headaches and said that the light hurt him. He said that the heat from his skin made it feel like it was on fire, so Vicki would keep him home from school. She gave him children's aspirin and sat with him at night when the nightmares started. He'd wake up screaming, sometimes shaking, sometimes unable to speak. He'd point at the ceiling, at the windows, at the corners of the room and say that it was back. Vicki didn't share with many people that she and Colby were sick. The symptoms weren't dramatic enough to demand attention, and she didn't want questions that she couldn't answer. She focused on Colby, kept to the house, kept quiet, and tried to make the days feel normal. But the burns didn't fade, and the headaches didn't stop. And Colby kept waking up in the middle of the night with nightmares, his voice hoarse, eyes wide, asking if the lights were coming back. In the weeks after the incident, Vicki Lundrum began making calls. She started with the local authorities, sheriff offices, municipal contacts, and anyone who might have jurisdiction over the stretch of the FM 1485 where the craft had appeared. She asked if there had been military exercises, or if anyone had reported strange lights, if the helicopters had been seen in formation that night, and the answers she received were vague at best. No one had records, no one had explanations, and most hadn't heard anything at all. But Vicki didn't stop there. In early 1981, she reached out to Burstone Air Force Base in Austin, Texas. The base had jurisdiction over regional air operations and was known to coordinate with other military branches. Vicki explained to them what she and Betty had witnessed. She described the craft, the heat, the helicopters, and the physical symptoms that followed the incident. The call was taken seriously enough that an interview was scheduled, and Betty and Vicki drove to the base together, bringing Colby with them. The meeting took place in a small standard office with no uniforms beyond fatigues and no formal briefing. They were asked to recount the event in detail. The questions focused on the helicopters mostly, mainly how many, what type, how close they had flown to the craft. The officers present didn't confirm anything, but they didn't deny anything either. They simply listened and took notes and recorded the session. At the end, the women were told that they would pursue claims through the Federal Tort Claims Act if they believed that the government was responsible. But no promises were made, no follow-up was scheduled, and they left the base with paperwork but no answers. Peter Gerstein wasn't a part of the original witness circle. He hadn't been in Texas on that night. He hadn't seen the crafts or the helicopters. He hadn't felt the heat or watched the dashboard melt beneath a woman's hand. But by mid-1981, he was on the phone with Betty Cash and Cash-Landrum, offering legal representation and a path forward that they hadn't known existed. He was based in New York, an attorney with a reputation for taking on cases that were a bit abstract. His background included a Freedom of Information Act filing, public record battles, and a growing portfolio in UFO-related legal work. He filed an FOIA request on their behalf, Freedom of Information Act filing, targeting military branches, air bases, and federal agencies that might have records of aircraft activity on December 29, 1980. The requests were very specific. They were looking for flight logs, radar data, operational reports, anything that could confirm the presence of the CH-47 Chinook helicopters in the area. But the responses were limited. Most agencies denied any involvement. Some claimed that no records existed, and others responded with boilerplate language that left more questions than answers. In 1982, Gerstein helped initiate a lawsuit against the United States government. The claim was filed under the Federal Tort Claims Act, alleging negligence and seeking damages for the physical and psychological harm suffered by the witnesses. The argument wasn't that the craft belonged to the military, but that the helicopters, which had been seen by multiple witnesses and described in detail, indicated military presence and possible involvement. The suit named the Department of the Army and the Department of the Air Force, asserting that if military aircraft had escorted and monitored the object, then the government bore responsibility for what happened. The case, however, moved slowly. Dispositions were taken and their medical records were reviewed, but no agency admitted to operating helicopters in the area that night. There were no flight plans that ever surfaced, and no personnel ever came forward. In 1984, the lawsuit was ultimately dismissed. The court cited a lack of direct evidence linking the craft to any government operation. Gerstein had pushed the case into the legal system, into public view, into the realm of documented inquiry, but without confirmation and records and without a name on a helicopter, the case couldn't go any further. When official channels stopped returning calls and military spokesmen offered no answers, MUFON stepped in. The Mutual UFO Network had already been tracking the Cash-Landrum Incident through scattered reports and media coverage. But by early 1981, they moved from observation into direct involvement. Field investigators were dispatched to Dayton, Texas, not to speculate or theorize, but to begin documentation. They interviewed both Betty and Vicky, and even young Colby, recording their accounts in detail and photographing the physical damage to the car's interior, such as the melted vinyl, warped dashboard, and the scorched upholstery. They also went on to catalog the medical symptoms, which included blisters, burns, hair loss, and even eye damage. They reviewed all of the hospital records and spoke with the attending physicians, and noted the time of the onset of these symptoms. MUFON did not have access to classified data or military logs, but they had their own protocols. Their investigators took soil samples from the site. They measured residual radiation levels and mapped the location of sightings relative to known flight paths and military installations. They didn't find conclusive physical evidence, but they did build a case file that was thorough, structured, and grounded in witness testimonies. What their involvement did do was give the incident visibility. Reports were circulating through MUFON's newsletters, conferences, and research bulletins. The case was elevated from local mystery to national inquiry, drawing attention from other civilian researchers, journalists, and law advocates. MUFON did not claim to know what the craft was or who operated the helicopters, but they treated the witnesses with credibility and the symptoms with seriousness. Their investigation didn't solve the case, but it did help ensure that the case wouldn't be forgotten about. John Schuessler was an aerospace engineer with NASA credentials and a reputation for being methodical, skeptical, and deeply curious. When he heard about the Cash-Landrum incident, he didn't wait for someone to hand him a file. He had already started to build one from scratch. He drove out to Dayton himself, met with Betty and Vicky face-to-face, and started documenting everything from the story to the damage on the car to the medical mystery the trio were experiencing. He treated it like a crash investigation. From his findings, he authored the definitive account of the Cash-Landrum case, compiling years of field notes, medical documentation, and witness interviews into a single volume titled The Cash-Landrum UFO Incident, The Story of Two Women and Their Close Encounter, which was published on August 16, 2022. The book included original photographs, medical records, and transcripts from interviews with the witnesses. It also detailed the legal efforts led by attorney Peter Gerstein, the FOIA filings, and the eventual dismissal of the lawsuit in 1984. And within UFO research communities, it remains one of the most thoroughly documented civilian encounters involving alleged military presence and unexplained aerial phenomena. In early 1981, the Department of the Army Inspector General assigned Lieutenant Colonel George Saran to investigate the Cash-Landrum incident. He wasn't tasked to validate the story. His job was to determine whether any military operation could account for what the witnesses described: the diamond-shaped craft emitting bursts of flame followed by coordinated arrival of 23 helicopters that seemed to be military in origins. Saran contacted multiple military installations across Texas, requesting flight logs and operational reports from the night of December 29, 1980. But none of the bases claimed any involvements. No records matched the location, the aircraft type, or the number of helicopters that had been reported. His final report concluded that no known military activity aligned with the witnesses' accounts, but it stopped short of ruling anything out. Saran noted that while there was no evidence of scheduled operations, the possibility of a classified test could not be dismissed. That line became the closest thing to an official acknowledgement that the case would ever receive. There was no follow-up, no public statement, no confirmation, just a report that said in the effect, "We looked, we didn't find it, but that doesn't mean it wasn't there." When it comes to theories, there are two main camps. One, secret military craft, and the other is extraterrestrial encounter. For Betty and Vicky, they believed it was a military craft and never once used the word alien to describe their encounter. There are some researchers that argue that the Cash-Landrum craft was a top-secret U.S. military prototype, possibly nuclear-powered, undergoing a test flight or emergency recovery. The theory hinges on three core elements: the extreme physical symptoms, the presence of military helicopters, and the craft's behavior. Betty's physicians reportedly compared her condition to that of those who had been exposed near the Hiroshima blast, and Vicky and Colby experienced milder but still serious symptoms. These effects, supporters argued, are unlikely to result from conventional aircrafts or lightning systems, but could possibly occur near an unshielded or malfunctioning nuclear reactor. When it comes to the craft's movements, some theorists suggest that it was a nuclear-powered VTOL, vertical takeoff and landing vehicle, possibly part of a classified propulsion program. During the Cold War, the U.S. explored nuclear-powered aircraft concepts under programs like Project Pluto and the Aircraft Nuclear Propulsion Initiative, though none were publicly deployed, supposedly. And then there are the helicopters. 23 in total were seen surrounding the object, flying in formation. That number and the type of craft implies coordination and planning. These type of helicopters are heavy lift chopters that are used for transport and recovery. Their presence supports the idea that the object was either being escorted or retrieved, possibly after malfunctioning or an emergency landing. But no military branch has ever acknowledged involvement. There have never been any flight logs or mission records that have surfaced to confirm any sort of operation that would be described in these type of situations. For a long time, many have believed that the craft was extraterrestrial. The craft described by Betty and Vicky fits the profile of traditional UFO sightings. A diamond-shaped object hovering silently and emitting intense light and heat. It didn't behave like a plane or a helicopter. It didn't have any known flight patterns. Instead, it hovered and pulsed. It rose and fell in bursts as if adjusting altitude or stabilizing itself. And it gave off no sound, not even the hum of an engine, just blistering heat. The helicopters complicate things for this theory as well. If the craft was extraterrestrial, the military's presence suggests that they were tracking it, maybe even trying to intercept or just observe. But it does imply foreknowledge, which makes things very interesting. And then there is a third theory that has gained traction over the years. It suggests that the object may have been alien in origin, but not entirely. According to this line of thinking, what Betty and Vicky saw was a piece of reversed engineered technology, perhaps something recovered from a previous encounter and now was being used under military control. Not a visitor from another world, but a machine built from parts that didn't come from this earth. So, a hybrid piece of machinery, part military, part extraterrestrial. This theory tries to bridge the gap between the two extremes. On one side, you have physical symptoms and the advanced design, things that don't match any known aircraft. And on the other hand, you have the unmistakable presence of military hardware. The hybrid theory says maybe it's both. Maybe the government has access to technology it didn't invent, and maybe that night in Texas, it lost control of it. But not everybody buys the idea that what Betty and Vicky saw was extraordinary. Skeptics like Philip Klass or Brian Dunning have offered alternative explanations, ones that strip away the mystery and ground the event in the more familiar territory. Klass, known for his hard stance against UFO claims, suggests that the woman may have witnessed a military flare drop or perhaps a routine helicopter training exercise. In his view, the bright light, the heat, and the presence of the aircrafts could all be explained by standard maneuvers misinterpreted under stress. He pointed to the lack of physical evidence, no confirmed flight logs, no recovered debris, as reason to doubt the more dramatic accounts. Brian Dunning is a science writer and host of the podcast Skeptoid, and he took a different angle. He proposed that what the witnesses might have seen may have been a planetary alignment or an atmospheric mirage. Under certain conditions, bright celestial bodies like Venus or Jupiter can appear unusually large or distorted near the horizon. Combine that with fatigue, fear, and isolation of a rural road, and you get the recipe for misinterpretation. The misinterpretation theory, however, doesn't account for the burns, the blisters, and the overall illness. It doesn't explain the helicopters flying in formation or the physical damage to the car's interior. But they do offer a counterpoint, a reminder that not every strange light in the sky is unexplainable, and not every mystery needs a classified file or an extraterrestrial origin. In the days following the sighting, Betty's condition worsened rapidly. She developed painful blisters, severe nausea, diarrhea, and headaches. Her eyes reddened, her hair began to fall out, and she grew so weak that she couldn't walk. On January 3rd, 1981, she was admitted to the Houston hospital, nearly unconscious. Doctors treated her for what resembled radiation sickness, although no official diagnosis ever confirmed exposure to isolated radiation. Her symptoms were real, documented, and long-lasting, but the cause never was acknowledged. Over the next several years, Betty's health continued to deteriorate. She suffered from chronic fatigue, recurring infections, and autoimmune complications. Her skin never fully healed, and she experienced long-term damage to her eyes and internal organs. She was in and out of the hospital, often too sick to work or maintain a normal routine. Despite the lack of government recognition or compensation, she remained vocal about what happened. She gave interviews, participated in investigations, and stood by her account till the very end. Betty died in Birmingham, Alabama on December 29, 1998. The anniversary of the night she stopped her car on a dark Texas road and stepped into something no one could explain. She was 69 years old. Her death wasn't officially linked to the incident, but those close to her believed that the encounter had permanently altered her health. She never gave up on the truth. She just ran out of time. Unlike Betty, Vicky didn't require immediate hospitalization, but she did suffer burns to her face and eyes, and her handprint remained embedded in the softened dashboard where she braced herself against the heat. She experienced recurring skin issues, eye irritations, and chronic pain in the years that followed. Her grandson Colby, who was just 7 at the time, also showed signs of exposure, vomiting, light sensitivity, and emotional trauma. But Vicky bore the brunt of the long-term stress. She was a deeply religious woman, and that had shaped how she processed the event. In the moment, she believed that the craft might be a divine sign. Later, when the symptoms didn't fade and the government refused to acknowledge what she had seen, her faith became a source of resilience. She didn't seek the spotlight, but she didn't back down either. She gave interviews, cooperated with investigations, and stood by Betty through the lawsuit and the media attention. Vicky never received compensation or formal recognition. She aged quietly, surrounded by family, still living in Dayton, Texas. Her health declined gradually, with complications that were never officially linked to the incident, but always felt connected to it. She died in 2007, having spent nearly 27 years revisiting the same stretch of road in her memory, trying to make sense of something that no one in authority was ever able to explain. Unlike the adults, Colby didn't speak publicly about the incident in later years. He was interviewed during the initial investigation, and his accounts matched the timeline and details provided by Betty and Vicky. But as he grew older, he withdrew from the spotlight. There are no known interviews, public statements, or appearances from him as an adult. His name occasionally surfaces in discussions of the case, but always in reference to that night, never beyond it. Colby's long-term health effects were never fully disclosed. Investigators noticed that he recovered more quickly than Betty or Vicky, likely due to his limited exposure and the protective actions of his grandmother. Whether he experienced lingering issues or emotional trauma is unknown. What is clear is that he never recanted his story, and he never contradicted the accounts given by the 2 women who raised him. There is no plaque that stretches on that road in Dayton. There's no historical marker, just a story that's been passed down for decades and picked apart by researchers, skeptics, and believers. Some say it was a secret military test. Others think that it was something not from here. And few insist that it was nothing at all. But Betty was hospitalized, and Vicky was burned, and Colby was terrified. That part isn't up for debate. What happened on December 29th, 1980 left a mark, not just on the people who lived through it, but on the silence that followed. Until next time, I'm Amanda Joy. Keep your eyes open, your steps steady, and maybe don't loiter too long where the road gets quiet.
Some stories stay with you. The ones that make you glance over your shoulder, check the doors locked a second time, or laugh a little too loudly in the dark. That's the world of Kill Me Maybe. Every month, hosts Mac and Des unravel true crime, strange mysteries, and eerie tales that linger long after the episode ends. They're the ghouls next door, not detectives, but sharp enough to ask the questions and cheeky enough to keep it fun. Spooky season never ends here. Subscribe to Kill Me Maybe wherever you get your podcasts. Mac and Des are waiting, and you don't want to keep them waiting.
Thanks for wandering down the crooked path with me. If you're drawn to the eerie, the macabre, and the stories time tried to forget, you'll feel right at home here. Whether it's folklore, forgotten rituals, or the strange corners of history, there's always another twist in the path, and every post is a breadcrumb deeper into the beautifully unsettling. Follow at Down the Crooked Path on TikTok and Instagram for haunting visuals, behind-the-scenes lore, and sneak peeks into upcoming episodes. And if you're craving even more chills, come check me out over at Canadian Creepies, where I co-host with Val. It's true crime with a northern twist, and Down the Crooked Path has its own Tuesday segment, diving into the more paranormal side of Canada. Stay curious and keep walking the path.